Hello, YouTube. Thanks for being here. This is the weekly question thread from Friday, May 15th. We're going to go out to Reddit and check out r/Factorio and just do some quick fire, answer some questions, and unpack some of the questions for maybe some newer players. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, ring that bell so you get notified whenever I post a new video. If you have a question, write back to me. Make sure you leave it in the comment section below. All the links for everything I talk about is in the description. And you can catch this live every Friday night, twitch.tv/ClownTown. The link is in the description as well as displayed right up there. And you can come say hi. With that, let's get to the question thread. All right, here is weekly question thread. Today is May 15th, Friday. And we're doing this as part of our live broadcast on Friday night on twitch.tv/ClownTown. So we'll just go through these. All right, L Truite asks, this is a very beginner question. How do I drop all the intense items that are in my hand at the same time? I have 50 coal, and when I press Z, I drop one on the floor at a time. How can I drop all 50 in one simple compound now and get it back when I need to pick up one by one? All right. So on the ground, you can't make a stack of them on the ground, but if you're trying to drop them in either an entity like a chest or an assembler, something like that, just control left click. Control right click is half of the stack. Control left click is the full stack. But on the ground, you can't necessarily drop a pile, all 50 at once, and then go pick up a pile of 50 at the same time. The ground you use is 1 and 2, or you have to run over them and do a pickup of them. So if he's trying to drop them all on the floor at the same time or on the ground at the same time, sorry, man, that'd be bad. I would say. Allfellas Darkstar asks, so after about 380 hours, I built a 90 vanilla SPM belt base. I want to move it to a 1K vanilla belt base SPM, right? I'm going to use solar for power. I hear there are UPS constraints. Should I worry about it? Or is 1K UPS too small for UPS worries? Should I use beacons? Or is this on furnaces? How many, 8, 12, etc.? Great question. So the good news is that solar is one of the most UPS-friendly power sources in the entire game. Can recommend solar. The only thing you got to worry about with solar is real estate. And real estate, when you explore the map, it does cost more RAM to load that giant map in memory. And if there are biters and biter pathing and pollution that expand into those, there is a little bit of a UPS worry. But in the end, you'll find likely that it's a lot less UPS noisy than something like nuclear or normal steam engines and boilers and fluid dynamics. The root cause of that is that it treats all of solar, if they're all connected, it treats them like one entity only, and produces X amount of power over a curve based on time of day and per tick and all of that. So it's one entity versus, a row of boilers would be maybe 24 entities, right? So a good choice regarding UPS, regarding solar for UPS reasons. To your other questions, how small is too small? That is 1K SPM too small for your too small for UPS worries? It really depends. The answer is it really depends on your PC, your PC or your server that you're using, or the combination of the two, right? So I would recommend just going after it, see how much you can get. It is good to use fewer assemblies. Which means you're going to use fewer inserters in lieu of using more beacons. So beacons just amplify the existing entity. So for example, I think I was playing around with this the other night, and I could either use 12 beaconed assemblies to do what I was going to do with 24 of the other assemblies. Without beacons, maybe some modules mixed in there. So if you think about it, each assembly machine is an entity that needs inputs and outputs, so it has inserters going in and out all the time. What is noisy in that regard is the assembly machine, but the inserters are most of the noise in that equation. So the fewer inserters and assembly machines you can use, the less noisy it is. And beacons are great because all they do is they amplify the existing entity. So the two things that you mentioned here, number one, solar is good for UPS, and number two, beaconing the crap out of everything is good for UPS as well. So because you can get to X amount of production with fewer assemblies, right? So good. And in my experience, unless you're running on a potato type of thing, and unless you've kind of screwed up a bunch of stuff or done a lot of no-nos like way too many pipes and too many trains and all of that, 1K SPM should be fine. If you're on a decent machine, you should just be fine doing that sort of thing. I would recommend putting productivity modules in as many things as possible, and then speed modules in the beacon surrounding. It's usually how it works. There is a specific arrangement of beacons that is an optimal arrangement. You can see that in most mega bases. If you go out and look at on YouTube, there'll be some mega bases that have a specific arrangement, and there's a maximum number of beacons you could fit around an assembly machine before it doesn't work too much anymore. I believe that number is 12. And so what it should say when you hover over the assembly machine, it should have effect sources should be 16. Now what that means is 12 beacons affecting it, plus 4 modules inside the level 3 assembly machine. So assuming you're at level 3, hovering over your machine, it'll be over here on this right side of the screen. It'll say number of effect sources, and ideally you make 16 of them. If you can get 16, you're good to go. That's as much as you're going to get. Again, 4 of those effect sources are modules, productivity modules if possible. Sometimes they got to be speed modules. In the case of some of the finished goods, but depending on what material you're using, but 4 of those effect sources are in the machine, and 12 of them are in the beacons around it. But Althus Darkstar, good luck. You're on a great journey. The King 973 asks, what do you use to track the UPS? I don't see it in the settings. It's an F4 settings, and it'll be debug options. It'll be show FPS. So just hit F4, and then you should be able to you bring us a menu on the left side of the machine, the screen over here, and you in the magnifying glass do a search for FPS or the word show, and it'll show you all the shows, and just toggle on FPS. And you'll be able to see what it is. You won't get you'll be able to see what it is right now. You won't be able to have a FPS over time. That's not something they track historical analytics for. But you can see what it is right now. Dally asks, if I fill up a tank with liquid and want to move it, will I lose all the product in the tank unless if I pick it up, or do I have to pump it out? That's your question. Yeah. If you pick up a tank full of liquid, it's gone. Liquid's gone. So your assertion, your thought that do I need to pump all the liquid out beforehand? That's correct. Yes, you do. If you or whether it's you that picks it up or a bot that picks it up, picking up a tank, it's all gone. So pump it out first, because when you put it back down, it'll be at 0, and all of your precious petroleum gas is gone. EVN777 says, my friend and I just got into the game. We're into it a lot. Define a lot. Well done. We just unlocked oil and the ability to make blue and gray science packs. Good. Does that have any links to good video or tips on automating the lab process with science packs? We have them being automatically made. It's just a part of transporting and getting them to the lab that takes up half the base. Really? Oh, with the spaghetti conveyor, I definitely think we can improve on. Any tips on lab placement, long line or square formation? Any help is greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance. Okay. Yeah. So now you're feeling the pain of starting maybe way over here in your base and building your first few smelting lines. Then you move over here a little bit. Then you build your first little bit of a mall and some stuff and some basic stuff. And then you build. Well, you need some red science, so you build some red science in your labs here. But then your base extends way, way over here, and it gets so huge because by the time you scale up into these advanced sciences, you just have to double and triple and quadruple up your builds and the amount of green circuits you need and all that. But then you have your yellow science way over there, and your labs originally are way back over here. So today I learned, right? This is what you learned, is you got to find a place in the medium. You got to do a little bit of advanced planning as to where your labs are going to be, but more importantly, where your science manufacturing is going to be. Usually some people bring their science manufacturing near their labs. They plan that out, and they have all of the stuff that filters into the science assemblies all come back, and some spaghetti. But then they feed into the labs pretty close. One way to do this is go out. Oddly enough, I'm a big advocate of speedrunning. So go out and watch some of the speedrunners. You'll see them do something similar. Is they'll start out and they'll build, and they put their labs here, and then they build up here and do some other stuff. But then when they come back, the red green will be right. Say if it's right here where this microphone is. The red green will be right here, the blue will be right here, and the yellow purple will be right here, so that it's all very close to the labs. And then as soon as they start running, they'll just dip right in. So a little bit of planning. So here's the thing, EVN777, you and your friend, glad you're playing with a buddy. Don't be afraid to start over and do it again, because you've learned. And by the way, that second base will come together way quicker than your first one, and your third, and your fourth, and your fifth. Don't be afraid to kill it off and start over. But transporting them all the way back takes up half the base. Yep, spaghetti conveyor. That's right. Good luck with that. Tech a Bit asks, did someone finish their first rocket without looking on YouTube? I think I did. Right now I'm on oil refinery, slowly getting the hang of it, but it still feels slow. Yes. 80 to 120 hours is usually the typical time that people work their way towards the rocket. I didn't really look at YouTube until after my first rocket, I guess. It's about right. Your first rocket's a big deal because it's pretty glorious, right? It's like right? It's a great sound. It's even better sound. My first rocket had shittier sounds in it. But this is great. Yeah, it will feel slow. Your first and second and third and fourth will be way faster. And yeah, your first one will feel slow, but keep going. You're doing great, Tech a Bit, and I'm glad you asked that question. West LA Stuff was wondering if anyone had a low frequency, small resource size Let's Play or something like that out there. High resource, high volume, though. Would you rely on trains setting up many bases as you have to ship around, wanted ramped up? Or would you have to keep replacing your miners all the time? Seems like an interesting way to play. So, to that question, what I've found is that the style of play that I kind of like a little bit more is I like outposting. And so the way that you encourage outposting style of play is you select something that is like Rail World, which is low frequency, high resource volume, right? And there is just a base mechanic that is not something that you'll define in the GUI, but a base mechanic of Factorio map gen is that when you start out at spawn is, say, 0, 0 on the map, just 0x, 0y on the axis. As you go farther out, the size and richness just get naturally larger, regardless of what you chose on your map gen. And so what'll end up happening is you use your starting area resources, and then as you need to quickly tech up enough to be able to get out and start outposting, kill some biters, take some resources, take some land. and take some real estate and be able to ship resources back in. And the good news is, if you're playing on some sort of rail world, you will be rewarded for that. What I can recommend is don't try and go out in all directions. Pick one or two directions, like east-west, and go out in a dedicated direction, because you'll get bigger resource patches if you just go straight out one direction. That may mean that you need to landfill and biters and move your rails around, but that's a way to do that. What I've also found is, so to your other points in your question, low frequency, small resource size is a struggle, and it's kind of very dampening to the satisfaction in your gameplay. Like, you have to really think about it. So your speed of manufacturing and all of that sort of thing will slow down. It will be a longer and more meticulous game. You have to be very careful about inventory, because you may use it up. And then what could happen in that regard is, oh no, I've accidentally made too many red belts with my iron, and I really did need some steel to get up here and get some rail going, and now I don't have enough steel to get out there and go get my trains going and get my outpost ready. Or I've used too much stone on walls, and I don't have enough landfill to get past this big lake to get over there and get more resources, so I'm kind of screwed. And there's stone that I need to use landfill to get to some more stone, and I'm screwed. Or I've used too much stone in landfill, and I don't have enough stone for biters, for walls, right? Very careful, meticulous. Now, some people may like that sort of thing, but I find it dampens your gameplay if you're doing low frequency, small resource size. I also find that high frequency, high resources is also kind of a pain, because then you find yourself with too many resources, and you're going, well, I don't want to build over existing resources. I want to kind of take advantage of that with miners, but there's kind of too much, and it takes forever to move some stuff out of the way. There's also some mods that help you do that force you into that, like Dangerous and some of those other type of mods. But I would find that if you have low frequency, high size, high richness, that's a nice balance that is kind of in the same it'll provide a good Factorio experience. Anyway, food for thought. Thank you for asking that question, West LA Stuff. Autofocus asks, is there a difference between peaceful mode and turning off pollution? Because without pollution, the biters won't attack, right? Wrong. Without pollution, biters will still evolve, and if you have to go, they'll still expand. And if you have to walk up to them, if biters are here and stone is on the other side of those biters, and you walk up and you get too close, they'll attack you. Peaceful mode, I could run a belt right by those biters and bring some stone back, and as long as I never shoot them, they're fine. That's the difference. Peaceful mode is you don't have to get involved with the biters, but they will still expand, etc. Pollution is they're still going to attack you, they still evolve, and they'll still likely come after you if you get too close. Two different mechanics. If you want a game without biters altogether, just turn off both, because there's no reason to dedicate computer resources and UPS and bandwidth and all of that to all the pollution calculations if you're not going to have biters that react to those calculations as it is. So I would recommend, because you're asking the question, I think you may be considering shutting off biters altogether. You can do that. I would either turn on both or neither. I rarely turn off pollution without turning off biters altogether. I will, if I turn on biters, some on occasion, but depending on what I'm doing, I may do it in peaceful mode if I don't want to bother with them too much. I want to bother with them only at a time of my choosing, at a setting of my choosing. That's when peaceful mode's good for that sort of thing. That's usually the trigger I pull, not the pollution trigger. And Zimonda, right on the back of that last question, does peaceful mode just remove biters from the game? No. Biters still are there. They still expand. All it does is it makes them not attack you initially. They will attack if you attack them first. The checkbox you want, if you want to remove biters from the game, is there is a biters check mark. There is a check mark about biter nests. It's a separate check mark other than the peaceful mode. 14 cents short asks, does anyone know of a 17 by 20 balancer or how to design one? No. What you should do is go out and look for either a 20 by 20 balancer or a 24 by 24 balancer and just put in the lanes that you need. So as an example, sometimes I need 3 belts going in and 3 belts coming out. The most common balancer I use is a 4-4, and I'll just throw in 3 and 3 on the output of a 4-4 balancer, 3 in and 3 out. So don't be afraid to make a bigger balancer, and then just use the ones you need. Now the only downside to that is you'll have some leftover resources that will bottleneck up in the balancer, but after that balancer fills up, all the belts and all the splitters and all the undergrounds fill up, then it should work exactly the same. Hazard Profile Part 7 says, is there a better way to add a new station to a bunch of train schedules other than hunting down all the relevant trains on the map and adding to it one by one? I'm okay with modded solutions. There is no, there's not an automatic way that you can do it, but there is a list of trains that you can go to in vanilla, and it'll be up here in the upper right, a little train-looking icon. You can click it and you get a list of your trains, and then you can go through and get them. You don't have to go hunt them down. You can get a list of them. But otherwise, there's not an automated way to add a station there. You still have to open each train and paste it in there, or paste a new schedule on top of it. What you can do is you can have train number 1 and train number 2. Set train number 1 how you want it manually, and then Control C, Control V, Control right click, Control left click, copy paste the plans over the same way you would copy paste over a recipe. So the equivalent recipe for a train is for an assembly, like you would copy a recipe for an assembly machine. The recipe is the train schedule. Copy paste. Squeeze the cat. Is there a way to find out if I accidentally disabled stone patches from spawning in my map location? After 50 hours in a real world map, I've not seen a stone patch besides the starting area. Okay, that's good. If you had it in the starting area, it should not be disabled. Yeah, you may have to go far. If you cranked it all the way down to low frequency, then you may have to go do a lot of real estate searching, but you'll eventually find it. Yeah. So, whatever's in your starting patch means it's not gone forever. But sometimes it may as well be if you've cranked it all the way down. Chuck Master T says, dumb question. What does SPM stand for? Science per minute. You answered it yourself. Everyone is building these 1,500 SPM bases, and I just had my head in circles like I don't know what's going on. Yeah, SPM is science per minute. The way you want to do it is you want to look out at hit the P button, which is look at your production. You can see production and consumption. And you should be able to look at the way to measure that is looking at your consumption, but filter it for the word pack. So hit that magnifying glass and filter both sides for the word PACK, and that should show only your science packs. And you really want to look at your consumption side. It's really not production, because you can produce a cajillion red science, but if you're only producing 2 yellow science per minute, guess what? You have a 2 SPM base. Right? So look at your consumption side. And if you're waiting on that, if you're waiting on science to or if you're waiting on science to be consumed, add more labs. That's an easiest one. Usually the bottleneck is producing whatever your lowest production science is. That is your bottleneck, right? Because it's easy to make more labs. It's much harder to add more bandwidth and add more production to say yellow science, because that means you gotta have way more frames, and you gotta have way more, which means you gotta have way more electric engines, more lube, all that stuff, or you gotta have the blue circuits, right? And that means blue circuits, you gotta have a ton of green circuits, you gotta have a ton of sulfuric, like you gotta ramp everything up. So yellow science is usually your bottleneck. Or space science, right? The white packs. Those are either those two are often your bottlenecks from being able to launch, being able to consume X amount of science per minute, right? All right, but good luck. Super new player here. What's the point of sending signals through wires? I've been watching tutorials, and I don't think anyone explains it. Ignite fire, good question. So sending signals through wire is being able to either operate on them and do math or count them or increment them using the combinators, or a signal through a wire is used to control another entity. The most common example that I see in others' builds as well as my builds is usually I have a tank with a pump on it, and I drag a wire between the pump and the tank, and I say when the level of this tank is X, use the pump. If it's below the tank, then don't use the pump, right? That's usually the cracking control on it on oil. That is the number one number one use case I see, and that is just simply reading the contents of the entity, and then of the tank through the wire will transfer. Say if I'm controlling something like the level of heavy oil in a tank, and I don't want it to get too high. I want it to crack off to light oil. I have that heavy oil signal, and then that's the reading of the signal. And then on the tank, or on the pump, I have the interpretation and enabling of the pump entity when I set it to the comparator is greater than or less than, and I'll say light oil. If light oil is over 20,000, then enable this pump. And the purpose of sending that wire is to send the signal of the volume of the tank to that pump, right? Similarly, the other ones I see is the volume or the contents of a chest to an inserter. If there is over 200 copper plates in this chest, then enable the inserter to pull material out of the inserter. Again, the wire goes from the chest to the inserter. The signal that goes through the wire is the contents of said chest, and then you set the condition on the inserter. And you won't see the condition on the inserter until the wire is hooked up, right? Then once the wire is hooked up, then you'll be able to see, oh, I can click on the inserter, and I see a new menu GUI appears that lets me change the conditions at which I want that inserter to run, or I want to operate on that inserter. There's other ways you can do it rather than just an on-off condition. You can do things like read the hand contents. You can make a counter. I want to count the number of copper plates I use that this inserter carries outside of this chest. I do that in one of my speed runs because to tightly control some of the blue circuits. But the other one is sometimes we'll use them in use cases like filters. You can say what I've done before is I've had a row of chests inserting into a train, like requester chests, and I have it all wired through to a constant combinator. So instead of setting each requester chest, I can set one combinator, and it propagates the signal all across. A constant combinator just sends that same signal, whatever it is, all the way into whatever entities are there. Right? Pretty interesting. But that is the default part of that's the basics of what you want to send signals through wires. Havstrumps says, so I started playing again. Good. A lot means a lot. Good. A lot has changed. Yes. Is the campaign different depending on which version I play? Yes. I fired up the latest experimental version today, and it's not the same campaign I ran before. Yes. I had a little helper bot with me before, and it's gone. Yes. So which is the real campaign? Yes. All of those are great questions. If you read some of the FFFs, they've changed the campaign with version 18, and they're still working on it as of today. Version 17 had the bot companion. Version 18 does not, and they're even reworking it as we speak. So, my advice to you, Havstrumpa, is ditch that campaign, get into free mode. That campaign is it struggles. So Estelec says, how far is too far for transport belts? Good question. When should I start using trains? Better question. I play without biters, so is there any reason not to use extremely long belts? Fantastic question. So, the wiki has some cases as to when to use trains and when to use belts. There's some rules of thumb that you can do as to when and where to use. But here's the thing. Trains cost resources to transport material. And among those resources is train fuel and UPS in train pathing, right? And there's some traffic, and then there's some maintenance to trains, etc., all that sort of business. Belts, if they are full, there's no energy that needs to run. A belt needs no energy to run, and is also pound for pound the most UPS efficient way to transport goods, to transport material, provided the belt is completely full. If the belt is empty, then you start getting into a little bit of, okay, there's some UPS cost to moving this material, right? But if the belt is completely full, then you move material. You know, the game is able to move tons of material, damn near UPS free. So the issue is that you can almost always use belts and transport it. It's really up to you. Trains, for me now, are fun. I like getting into trains. I like building big trains. I like having big train schedules. I like going way out to the side of the map and doing the thing. I like kind of getting an outpost and outposting and fighting biters and kind of setting that up. It's pretty satisfying to me. So I start setting up trains pretty early comparatively. However, there are a bunch of other streamers that'll get out there and they will just transport belt after blue belt after blue belt after blue belt full of material and iron, and they'll just have this thousands of belts just transporting all this material there and do 5,000 SPM base, whatever, all belted. There are some psychos out there that'll do that. When to use trains and when to use belts, it's up to you. Ben Broughton says, for my third factory, I want to make a grid for the first time. Good. I've tried to research how big to make the grid, how big to make the cells, and how many cells the grid would have, but I haven't been able to answer those questions. I want to know. I want to build 4 tracks and have each cell handling one thing. How are you doing? How are you all doing grids? Do you have blueprints, etc.? Yes. I would get you to look at 2 people who do grids all the time. That is one Nilos. His link is in the description below, as well as Hafala's. He's also in the description below. He has a train network called Districts. You should go ask him for those. You might could even look it up Hafala's Trains Network. Do a Google search on that. He has some documents published, and he calls them districts. He's got a really great train setup on how to do that. He's also very happy to talk to you about that sort of thing. What you should do is your city blocks, as they are called, your grid, should be scaled to your train size. Is probably number one. Number two is probably, if you're going to have bots in there, you may want to isolate your bots, so you may want to think about how big your RoboPort coverage is, right? If you're going to have bots move around within it, at some point you will probably do that. If one of your city blocks is going to be the mall, you may not want RoboPorts to bleed over into other city blocks, right? So you may set it based on train as well as RoboPort size. And the other one is radars. You can usually overcome radars by just adding in more radars at certain intervals. But at the same time, just make sure, one, trains can fit in. Because what you don't want to have happen is if you build too big of a train, and the city block is too small, you may not have room for the stacker inside the block, because you want a stacker if you have some volume. So it has to accomplish whatever the city block is going to do, the grid, as well as hold the stacker, as well as accomplish getting the train from the main line completely out of the intersection and into the stacker and out of the way of the other trains. So normally bigger is going a little oversized. What you think is better than not, particularly if you want to if you're going to stick with this base for a long time and really ramp it up. But I get this question all the time about how big do I want these city blocks, and if this is your third factory doing it, that's great, man. I'm happy that you're thinking about this. For my third factory, I was barely able to figure out which end was up on science and on the lab. So well done. That's a great question. Okay, at squats. Good. This may be a silly new person question, but when people talk about belts on a bus, that's standard around yellow belts, so like 4 belts worth of green circuits could actually be 2 red belts. Good question. What you should do is, there's a couple calculators out there like Kirk McDonald's or Dumier's. We'll put the links of those in the description. But you can do some calculations on how many belts you will produce worth of a certain entity, like copper, like iron. But what most people do is they will scale up for more than they need, because at sometimes they will you'll want to scale up, because your first 2 levels of science you'll get to pretty quickly. You really only need maybe 2 levels or 2 belts full of yellow belts full of iron and 1 yellow belt full of copper, and you can pretty easily get to red-green. But to get to yellow science, you're going to need a lot more copper. You're going to need 4 red belts of copper to get all of that in there. So it's going to really ramp up. So you may just set aside 4 belts of iron, 4 belts of copper, 4 belts of green circuits, at least 2 belts of steel, and then be ready to upgrade them using the upgrade planner from yellow to red to blue as you grow your base. So, but what will help you understand that is Kirk McDonald, because maybe by the time you unlock yellow science and you start doing yellow science, then you're already also able to produce blue belts. So then your 4 existing lines will work for the resource that you need. Just that earlier on they were yellow, and now they're blue, and now your smelting has improved, so you can fill them all up. Right? So something that's very common. So back to what my recommendation is 4 iron plates, 4 copper plates, 2 steel, 4 green circuits, 2 red circuits, at least 1 blue circuit, 2, maybe 3 plastic, at least 2 plastic, 1 stone brick, 1 stone ore, raw stone. And I've seen some people also put on gears, 2 gear belts. Otherwise, you don't necessarily need to do that. I've also seen some people do a copper coil bus. Also not needed. Those are not super needed, but don't let me stop you from doing that. You may need a line of batteries too, because there's a couple places you use batteries, especially if you're playing with biters, you need lasers, all that. But anyway, good luck with that. So maybe just make them all out of yellow, but save your space, and then you upgrade them as you go. What 2_2? I have a question about train stations turning on and off conditionally in vanilla. When I'm using, each station runs a wire across chest to this train station set to enable station if ore is over 8K for full train load for cargo wagons. I've been running trains stuck with no path because it happened. Yes. A train was loading ore at a station. The second train was already coming. The first train finished its loading and left. The station was disabled, and the second train gets stuck. Yes. Very common. Any ideas on how to fix this? Yes. Don't disable the train line. Make a stacker. A stacker to hold train number 2 and train number 1. So that when the loading station is free, the next one will move in. Stacker is your way to overcome this issue. So what you're doing with this signal is you're having that second train and the first train wait at one side of the station before it's called. And my proposal is don't have it do that. Have the train station always on, but have the train go ahead and make the journey and just wait in the stacker using signals. Wait for its turn to go do the unloading. So essentially, using a stacker will have you wait, moving the wait location of both of your trains without using signals and without shutting off on and off the train, right? Just have the train go ahead and be en route. Right? That's your issue. Good question. A lot of people try and do that, and they try and optimize their trains, but the stacker makes all that business go away. And finally, Violent Geography says, could someone please point me to a mod that makes it easier to see at night? I don't want to get rid of the mechanic altogether because I enjoy the gameplay challenge. Having to strain my eyes to see at night is not fun. Tech up. Your only option is tech up and get to night vision goggles. I guess he replies here and he says, yeah, I don't want to wait 8 hours though. Get good. There's speedrunners that launch rockets in less than 2 hours. So you can get there. Get good. Yeah. That's part of the satisfaction, is solving the problem of not being able to see. Your reward is night vision goggles that you can see at night. If you rush it, probably 2 hours, says N/A. I agree. Get her done. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate you being here. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I post a video. If you have a question, leave it in the comment section below. Otherwise, you can stop by twitch.tv/Clowntown every Friday night. You can ask me live. You can ask me anytime. I'm usually at live 5-6 days a week. So thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.